there, and welcome to the latest edition of Nebraska Football Now. I'm your host, Andy Klassen, joined again by our Husker insider, the Jake Bartecki. Jake, how are we doing?
We're doing well, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. You know, no moral victories in a loss, but I think it's safe to say this one feels different. A different opponent. I felt there was a different effort, especially on the defensive side. What are your initial takes coming off that Ohio State loss?
Yeah, I think overall you've got to be pleased. I think everybody probably feels the same, though. We really wish we could have pulled that game off because we had it in our grasp. And Nebraska's been in that situation before in those big games, and they've always kind of seemed to have been a player short, a play in itself, or two short.
Yeah.
And I think you could probably look at that one, and really I look at one drive for the defense, that game-winning drive where Junkins found the end zone, first receiving touchdown of his season. So, you had to, of course, give that one up. But, overall, I don't think you can be upset about playing to that level against a really good Ohio State team. And a lot of people are going to say Ohio State didn't have their best day. I think that's because Nebraska's game plan forced that to happen.
Well, and we're crazy fans. I'm one of them, right? And I think what most fans want to see is the effort. And what might have been lacking in Bloomington the week prior, we saw it there at the shoe in Ohio State. Let's talk about that defense, because I thought they hit another gear.
Yeah, 2.1 yards per attempt for that entire ball game for Ohio State. I thought that was a huge win for Tony White's group.
Yeah.
There were a couple of guys that I think really impressed me in that one. And I think one of them was Jamari Butler. I haven't seen him make that much of an impact. I mean, Ohio State was kind of weak at that left tackle spot, so I think he did a really nice job recognizing that. I mean, people are going to say, well, they didn't have their best day at left tackle. Well, Jamari Butler also took advantage of it then and was part of the problem for that. And so there's other guys I point to that I was really impressed with. Deshaun Singleton's another, Javen Wright. The other guy would be MJ Sherman, too, out of that Jack linebacker spot. So there's names on names on names that went up and had a great game in Columbus, and I think it was a huge part of why Nebraska hung around in that one.
Don't talk about injuries on the offensive line to a Nebraska fan.
Right,
okay,
exactly.
I don't care, especially coming from Ohio State.
Right.
Cry me a river, right? Offense, I thought made some strides, maybe left a few plays out there. We talked a lot about developing an identity. Did you start to see that at Ohio State?
Yes and no. I think I did in the run game. I think they kind of have figured out now that Dante Dowdell is their lead back. I think we've known that, and there's a case for Emmett Johnson to be made there, but he's dominating the carries right now. You also were out without Ramir Johnson in that one, so I think that probably paved the way for more carries for Dowdell, but I think you saw him really start to find some holes and get downfield. Now, the part where I don't like that I think they found their identity is I think Nebraska's really glued to the short and intermediate pass game, and I don't mean just a short pass game, curl routes, slant routes over the middle. I mean throws to the sideline and to the backfield, which was a big gripe for a lot of Nebraska fans this week. And, Marcus Satterfield said in media availability that the reason for some of those calls was, look, we knew this. Ohio State's got a dangerous pass rush. I mean, they can hurt you in a hurry with that, from the linebackers to the defensive linemen to the defensive ends. They bring a corner blitz every now and then, so you got to make sure you get that ball out quickly. But the thing to me is, I look at it this way. I sort of feel like if something's not working, you got to get away from it. Yeah. And Nebraska realized that at half, that the short pass game wasn't working. Yeah. But the puzzling part to me is they ran it twice on the would-be game-winning drive, or would have been game-winning drive. Right. So strange little situation there. We'll see how that kind of transpires the rest of the year.
I think the elephant in the room, and it kind of has been, unfortunately, this whole season, is the Big Ten officiating.
Right.
That crew had some issues, whether it was targeting in Ohio State. There was a couple of spots where it really hurt Nebraska big time down the stretch. Let's hear from head coach Matt Rule, being pretty diplomatic here, talking about the officials real quick.
I think one of the hardest jobs in the world right now is to be an official. I never crossed the line. I do want to say this because my daughters, and I want every person in Norfolk and Tacoma and everywhere in the state. Both times I've gotten a flag this year, the next day they said never should have been a flag. So I don't disrespect officials. I stay on the field. I've coached the last 12 years, aggressive, but defendant, and no one on my sideline talks to the officials. Officials will always tell you we're disciplined. So I appreciate the statement, but I do want to say it must be really hard to be out there making those calls.
Okay, Jake, so we heard from the head man there. Once again, being pretty diplomatic. You know, he doesn't want to get a fine, and he really doesn't want to use that as a crutch or an excuse. But we can. We're in the media. I can't believe how bad they got that spot at midfield. And I think we got a quote directly from the Big Ten here that we can put up on the screen. There was also another spot down at the goal line that I think really screwed up Dowdell.
Yeah.
You know, and he's got to know where he is out the field to try and jump and leap and get into the end zone. But when the ball is moved an entire foot and a half back and you're expecting it where you thought you saw the line judge come in.
Right.
These are things that I feel like middle school officiating crews get right. What's happening with the Big Ten crews?
Well, and I'm not one to love to diss on officiating. I was an umpire for high school baseball in the summer. It's a really hard job. I mean, you know, you deal with parents, you deal with criticisms, you deal with coaches, you deal with players. I mean, this is the Big Ten, right? And this is a top-ranked team that's staving off an upset bid from an unranked team that's struggled the past couple of weeks, and you also have to feel for Nebraska there. The only thing I can think of, and that quote you saw was from the COO of the Big Ten, that's Kerry Kenny, that spot, the only thing I can think of is maybe the official mistook who had the ball and where the ball was at, because where they spotted it was where there was the block that happened, right?
Yeah,
so, and you mentioned the one with Dowdell. I mean, that one, I think almost, Nebraska got a field goal, right, out of the Emmett Johnson run. What's to say they couldn't score a touchdown on that next play? Because, you know, you're thinking of different play call if it's 1st and 10. But the one with Dowdell near the goal line after Hartzog's interception, I remember thinking to myself, you brought Elijah Judy onto that field, and you brought Ty Robinson on there because I think you're right by the goal line, and you got two defensive guys out there to kind of almost push it in. Yeah. Maybe you saw something a little different, maybe something off tackle. But trying to jump the pile from the 2-yard line versus the half-yard line is just an immense difference.
Yeah, it really is. And if there was a jumbo package Nebraska had, you saw it right there. And I think that made all the difference. But that's where the players got to understand. Maybe Dowdell, he did leap later on and did get in.
Sure.
But in that scenario, keep your feet, expect the tush push or whatever to help you out, get into the end zone there. We mentioned Raiola a moment ago. Let's hand out some midseason, report cards here, because I think we have seen growth. We talked about regression coming out of the Indiana game and maybe from the Colorado halftime on. I thought he stood tall, tried to make some throws. Obviously, he missed some. How are you taking in our true freshman quarterback?
I think it's probably a little under what I expected. I mean, he's been great. I want to preface that. I think he's been what Nebraska's needed. I think some of the throws he's missing are some of the throws I expected him to make. And two of them come to mind. And one of them was the throw against Illinois, the Luke Lindenmeyer throw. And there's the argument that can be made about the route. Did Luke Lindenmeyer underrun the route a little bit? Maybe, but he was wide open. Raiola probably should have hit him for that touchdown. Right. The other one is this past weekend with Jamal Banks down the sideline on a wheel route, and you had missed Ja'Cory Barney in the end zone too. So those few throws kind of come to mind to me as the ones that I think he wishes he could have back. I think there's a reason for that, and I think this is part of being a young quarterback. I think he throws a lot off adrenaline. I think he sees an open receiver, his eyes get wide, his heart starts pounding, and he just flings it as hard as he can right down the sideline to the intended target. And sometimes it works, but more often than not, when you have that kind of drive, you kind of overwork it. This is like the old saying, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. I think that's what you want to see more of from Raiola.
Yeah, accuracy is obviously an issue there on some of those key plays. And they're the big plays, right? The ones you kind of scheme for and you keep that play in your back pocket. What do you think we're going to see any changes coming forward here, moving forward with UCLA? Is there going to be changes in the play calling, or do you think they're going to still continue to utilize that short, intermediate screen pass?
I don't think they're going to get totally away from it. I think you'll still see it, but I think it'll be less than we saw against Ohio State.
You bring up Coach Satt. Let's hear a quick word from him, kind of defending his play calls there this past week.
Just trying to get the ball out quick. It's a very scary pass rush at times, so you don't want to be standing back there the whole game holding the ball.
Okay, he makes some valid points there. I think we kind of touched on that earlier. We all agree with it. I mean, it makes sense when you take a step back and let the coaches kind of speak their mind.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, it's like we've mentioned. I think he thought there was something that you could expose there at the pass rush. Dylan Raiola defended it as well and sort of said the players need to go out there and make the plays.
Hey, we got that audio too. Let's hear the young guy.
As players, we have to go out there and execute it. And, I know Coach Satt's getting a lot of heat right now and of his plays that he's calling. And And I think that's unfair to him. He can't go out there and make plays and do everything that he's coaching us to do. So as players and, as the quarterback of this offense, I take the responsibility for that. And for us to go out there and execute, that's not his fault.
That's a maturity level that, I think you really need to have at the quarterback spot. And this guy is so young. It's really shocking to me that he has that type of a demeanor to him.
Yeah, I mean, he said the same sort of thing right after they lost to Illinois. I mean, he said that he kind of shouldered the loss there. I think when you break it down to the bare bits, though, I sort of think Nebraska had to realize that Raiola said the players need to make those plays. Well, the players weren't making the plays, right?
Yeah.
Ohio State had an answer for everything. And sometimes it's not even up to the players, it's the defensive scheme and skill and tackling on the other side, which is what we saw from Ohio State.
Yeah.
So I still stand by, I think Nebraska should have stayed away from it entirely in the second half.
Moving ahead to UCLA. Opportunity
Bruins.
here. Nebraska over a touchdown favorite. But UCLA, we've seen some pretty good signs of life here. The newest member of the Big Ten. What do the Huskers got to watch out for?
Well, they spread the ball around a bit, and they're starting to figure out Eric Bieniemy's scheme on offense. So, I mean, they don't run the ball particularly well. I think that's what they got to watch for, is they got to try and take the pass away. I would play this similarly to how you played against Rutgers. You kind of took the run game away entirely, and you forced them to throw. It might sound weird because they struggle to run the ball, but I think Nebraska's secondary matches up really well against the receivers. If you can take the run away entirely, I think you've got a shot.
I love hearing that, and I think that's where Nebraska has to be. Their mindset has to be on defense. Make them one-dimensional.
Right.
Roll the dice after that. You mentioned Eric Bieniemy. That's where he landed, the longtime Kansas City chief assistant. Let's hear from our D coordinator, Tony White, bringing up Eric Bieniemy and his new offense there at UCLA.
And you see elements of it in there. I mean, it's hard, right? The timing of it all and stuff, and getting thrown into fall camp, and it's tough. You know what I mean? So you see elements of it, but you also see them playing to their personnel. Like I said, they got really good tight ends. They got really good running backs. Those guys touch the ball a lot, so it'll be a different kind of challenge in that sense.
Well, once again, Jake, I mean, I love what our coaching staff has to say.
Yeah.
Not just in the the good times when you're winning early in the season, but coming off of a loss like this Ohio State one that they kind of felt like they let it slip on the road a little bit. But he bounced back, has a consistent message, and it sounds like a plan to deal with this upstart offense for UCLA.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like Nebraska's taking them seriously.
Yeah.
You look at UCLA 2-5, but they just put 35 points on Rutgers. They had some really nice looking drawn up plays against Minnesota in their last home game. So, I mean, Eric Bieniemy's scheme, it looks similar to what they had with the Chiefs, but the difference is you don't have the athletes that you had there. You don't have a Tyreek Hill level receiver. Right. You don't have a Travis Kelce tight end. You don't have Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. So I think you saw some growing pains of Eric Bieniemy trying to work a scheme that doesn't have so many weapons. Even at Washington, they had more weapons. So I think they're starting to adjust to it, though. We'll see if Nebraska's ready for it.
You bring up Mahomes. We actually got a little bit of flack there for, bringing up Mahomes, how he's able to scramble and extend plays. Our young quarterback actually used his legs a little bit this past week, and I thought it added a different dimension. Is that something that Nebraska maybe needs to look to? Because when a play breaks down, and it will, let's be real, even for the Chiefs, it happens. Is that something that Raiola might need to be aware of is, look, I can use my legs to get a first down when it's third?
Right, and he talked about it this week. I mean, he knows he's had the ability to do that. He just hasn't had the chance to really show it, in his words. I think there's been opportunities when he could have run for it, and he just plain didn't see it, more the like. But I think, you saw he had a 38-yard run against Ohio State that I thought he was going to the house on. So, and we talked about it last week. I mean, I think there's opportunities for him there to try and run the football a bit more. It doesn't always have to be a 40-yard touchdown run. It can be 4 yards on 2nd and 4 to pick up a first down. You obviously don't want the guy getting hurt, but I think they're probably going to coach him into how to slide a little bit better, how to dive and get the first down, how to protect yourself. And look, if you get hit, you might be getting a penalty, and there's ways to defend yourself there as well.
Well, and just having the threat alone, where they're going to have to account for you, I think really helps out the offense, limiting the defenses to what they can do, the pressures they can bring if they have to account for the quarterback
Right.
running and picking up the play, right?
Yeah, and the thing is usually that's a linebacker, right?
Yeah.
And I think Raiola, if he can show over these next couple of weeks that he's got the ability to run, long term, I think that's going to open up the pass game more for the tight ends. You saw it a little bit this past weekend with Thomas Fidone, but usually you got a linebacker lined up against your quicker linebackers lined up against your tight ends.
Yeah.
But if you have to have a speedy linebacker kind of stay home as a spy on Raiola and key in on him, I wouldn't be surprised if you see big 2-4 open down the middle a little bit more.
Hey, I love passing the tight ends. That's a great way to kind of help out your offense.
And in the future, you got Carter Nelson there too.
And I feel it's an appropriate time to take a little bit of a Yankees burn here. You know, he has better speed than Giancarlo Stanton, so he looked a little bit better than that running down the field there. So
He did, yeah.
couldn't help myself like
No worries. Who are you pulling for in the World Series?
Oh, I picked the Dodgers preseason.
Okay.
So,
See, I had the Yankees. So I had the Yankees preseason. So that's how that worked out.
Hey, we can pick them, right?
We can pick them. Yeah.
So, well, let's talk about this week's picks. The prediction: Huskers 1 win away from being bowl eligible once again. I believe the Huskers are 0-7 when bowl eligibility is on the
correct.
line.
Yeah.
Can they change that trend this weekend in Lincoln?
The last time Nebraska was in a bowl game was the iPhone 7. Barack Obama was president,
Oh man.
and I was a senior in high school. That all goes away this weekend. Nebraska wins. I'll take the Huskers 28, UCLA 14. It's going to be a wet, rainy, probably windy day. It's looking like early forecast. I mean, we're midweek here, but that's what it kind of calls for now. I expect Nebraska to run the ball a bit. I think UCLA will probably have some trouble. Haven't played in kind of wet conditions out in the West very much, so I think they might struggle with that a bit. I'm going to say Nebraska gets a couple touchdowns on the ground, and I'm going to say a defensive score as well.
Oh, going with the defensive score.
Going with the defensive score.
We're going, okay. Well, I'm going to go 17-16. Nebraska wins. They don't cover, but they get the win. They become bowl eligible. They get over that hump.
That'd be a little uncomfortable.
Well, it's been uncomfortable the last 15 years. So
All right, there you go. That's fair.
and these are the type of gut check games at home. It feels good. A lot of positive momentum, albeit coming off of a loss.
Sure.
But I think Nebraska proved to themselves that they can hang in there with the best in the nation, and it's not a fluke. We've seen it a couple of times now. Colorado, Buffaloes, they're ranked.
Yeah,
They're
that's
ranked
23rd.
right now. So
And everybody wrote them off, I think, after the Nebraska game. So
they haven't
turns
lost
out to be a
since.
better win.
yeah, it really does. So I think there's a lot of promising things, but they still have to do it. They still have to get over that hump. That's why I think we're going to have a sweat, but I like the Huskers. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Nebraska's just got to try to control the line of scrimmage. I mean, I think that's the only thing we haven't mentioned. I think they match up pretty well, especially in the defensive line against UCLA. So expect Nebraska to get a lot of penetration and try and get after the quarterback.
Jake, thank you for your time and sharing all that wonderful information with us. And thank you for joining us on another Nebraska Football Now.